At the position of the wall. Hunt! Oh, what a goal!
He didn't come to be remembered. He came to be felt. Ernie Hunt, the one who didn't ask for permission, the one who didn't wait for the game to explain itself. He just played like it was supposed to be fun again. He had no anthem, no headlines waiting, no manager building around him, just instinct and a grin that made defenders nervous before he even touched the ball. He played for the crowd, not for the critics. He gave them moments, not stats. Moments that made strangers stand. Moments that made old men smile. Moments the league couldn't explain, so they rewrote the rules to stop them. And when the applause faded, they didn't call him back. When he was brilliant, they called it luck. When he misfired, they called it proof. He scored the kind of goal kids still try in back alleys. And they made sure no one was allowed to do it again. Not because it was wrong, but because it was his. He played like a man who knew they were never going to give him the ending he deserved. So he gave them the story anyway. Subscribe for the ones who lit it up once and never asked for thanks. He was born Roger Patrick Hunt on 17th of March 1943 in Swindon, Wiltshire. But no one called him Roger, not even once. He was always just Ernie, quick to laugh, quicker with the ball. A working class lad with street magic in his boots. Football wasn't a dream, it was a direction. He didn't chase it, he grew into it, like it was stitched into his bones. By 15, he was scrubbing boots at Swindon Town, waiting for a number on a shirt. By 17, he was the number. From 1959 to 1965, he lit up the county ground. 214 league appearances, 82 goals, and not the quiet kind. These were Ernie Hunt goals. Twisted, curved, cheeky, goals that made defenders doubt themselves for weeks. But behind the brilliance was the start of a pattern. The unspoken feeling that he didn't belong in a sport already writing scripts for more obedient men. Despite making 3 appearances for England U23 between 1963 and 1966, he was never capped at senior level. He wasn't a rebel. He just played like one. Even then, you could feel it. Swindon would never be able to hold him. And the game, it didn't yet know how to hold someone like him either. They paid £40,000 for him. Wolverhampton Wanderers, 1965. And just like that, Ernie Hunt had a price. Not a story, not a smile, not even a welcome. A price. It was one of the biggest fees Wolves had paid, but they weren't buying patience. They were buying goals, and they wanted them fast. Ernie gave them that, and more. He ran with flair. He passed with vision. He scored in ways that didn't belong to English football. 74 appearances, 32 goals. But it wasn't enough. Across the Atlantic with the Los Angeles Wolves, 10 games, 4 goals, also won United Soccer Association Championship. Because when you play with joy, they call it arrogance. When you dribble when others hoof, they say you're not committed. And when you smile too much after scoring, they say your head's in the clouds. He wasn't lazy, he wasn't reckless, but the dressing room didn't always get him, and the system certainly didn't. Wolves had firepower, but they didn't know what to do with flair that thought for itself. The media started circling, fans started questioning, and the man who was supposed to save the club was already being asked if he even belonged. The goals didn't stop, but the mood changed, and Hunt, once the sparkle, was suddenly the problem. So in 1967, he was sold to Everton for £80,000, doubling his price but halving his freedom. And the game had made its first move against a man who just wanted to play it his way. The price of belief? No, the cost of misplacement. But once he arrived, they kept him on the bench like spare furniture. He didn't fit the blueprint. Too imaginative, too bold, too unpredictable for a side that prized obedience over spark. They didn't trust him with a run of games, they gave him scraps. Then expected miracles. And still, he scored. 14 appearances, 3 goals. A return most would kill for, but not enough for a club that never saw him as more than a luxury item. No time to build rhythm, no chance to earn trust. Just another name on a team sheet they'd rather not explain. He'd been doubled in value in just 2 years, but made to feel like he'd dropped in worth the moment he arrived. And something cracked. Not in his talent, that stayed, but in the part of him that believed football would always love him back. He left Everton without bitterness, but not without bruises. Because when you play the game with joy, But the game plays you like numbers, you learn quickly. Being valuable doesn't mean being wanted. He arrived at Coventry City in 1968 for £65,000. By now, Ernie Hunt had learned not to expect much from the system. But Coventry wasn't the system. It was a fresh canvas. And he painted with light. He played with a grin, he scored with class. He lifted a club that wasn't supposed to rise, 146 appearances, 45 goals, and a partnership with Willie Carr that would change football forever. October 1970, the Willie Carr flick and Ernie Hunt volley, the famous donkey kick free kick, televised on Match of the Day, awarded BBC Goal of the Season, and later effectively outlawed by the authorities. It was beauty, it was theatre, it was banned. They called it unsporting. The FA outlawed the move, not because it broke the rules, but because it bent them with too much imagination. They didn't fine him. They didn't suspend him. They did something worse. They erased the very thing he gave them. The game wanted goals. He gave them poetry. They replied with regulations. He stayed at Coventry, kept performing, kept winning fans. But something changed. He knew now. The more joy you play with, the more likely they are to call it a problem. And behind the smile, Ernie Hunt started hiding his disbelief. Because he was punished not for cheating the game, but for loving it too much. After that, a brief spell at Doncaster Rovers on loan, 9 appearances, 1 goal, one last reminder that even in exile, class doesn't vanish. He left Coventry in 1973. Not because he was finished, but because football stopped listening. Bristol City brought him in, a man who once lit stadiums on fire, but it was a different world now. Quieter, colder, only 12 appearances, only 2 goals, and 1,000 whispers that the flame was flickering. But it wasn't his legs that slowed first, it was the belief that someone still saw him. He tried to adapt, tried to be what the system wanted, less flair, more function. But you don't rewrite poetry into manuals. And Ernie Hunt wasn't built for silence. They didn't boo him. They didn't cheer him either. They just let him fade like a song the radio stopped playing, then played for non-league Swindon Town and Ledbury Town. And then he walked away. No farewell, no testimonial, no one asking, why did we forget the man who gave us joy? He was only 31, and football had already moved on. Ernie Hunt left football the way a magician leaves a quiet stage, after the lights dim and the crowd forgets the trick. No press conference, no backroom job, no golden goodbye. He returned to life as just Ernie, not the volley king, not the jester with the crooked smile, not the Coventry showman who made kids dream, ran a pub called the Full Pitcher in Ledbury, Herefordshire. Also worked as a window cleaner, pulling pints instead of pulling strings. And for a while, he didn't talk much about football. Because what do you say when the world forgets the game it begged you to play? Later, when he moved to a care home, the final touchline of life, people would ask, didn't you used to be someone? And he'd smile. That same cheeky, crooked smile. The one that once made goalkeepers nervous. In later years, Ernie Hunt was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. He died on 20th of June 2018, aged 75, in a care home in Gloucestershire. He made them cheer, he gave them magic. And still, they made him walk home alone. Ernie Hunt never started fights, but he knew when he wasn't wanted. At Everton, they blamed him for not being Alan Ball. At Coventry, they questioned his loyalty when he was their heartbeat. And when the goals dried up, they said he smiled too much for a man out of form. But no one asked what was happening behind the charm. No one saw how much it hurt to be the punchline after being the poster boy. Behind the flicks and volleys was a man who felt the weight of every whisper, every dropped selection, every quiet betrayal in the boardroom when they called him surplus. They never said it to his face, but they made sure he felt it. Even his final departure from Coventry, no send-off, no closure, just the door swinging shut behind him. That was the hardest thing. Not the injuries, not the fading legs, but knowing you were good enough for their applause, never their respect. And yet, he never spoke bitterness. He never named names. Hunt was later inducted into the Coventry City Hall of Fame. When he died, Coventry City and former players groups posted official tributes to his memory. But the silence he kept, that was louder than any quote. They said Coventry were overachieving. They said Ernie Hunt was just a trick pony. They never said how much he carried behind the smile. After the camera flash faded, after the goal of the season became just trivia in pub talk, what stayed with him was what no one saw. The injuries didn't show up on the stat sheet. The betrayal didn't come with a press release. By 1973, he'd been quietly shown the door. Not because he was done, but because he no longer fit the narrative. The football world he'd lit up, the world he gave magic to, suddenly had no space for him. He once made the whole country smile. But when he needed something back, all he got was silence. And that silence followed him, long after the boots were hung, long after the floodlights dimmed. This was a man who made football look joyful, but walked away carrying a weight the game never acknowledged. Subscribe for the players who gave magic and never got it back. Gone without headlines, gone but not erased.